All right. Well, it's good to have everyone on our webinar. I think we got most of the folks in, so we can get started. Great to have everyone on. We have the chat feature as everyone's now warmed up to that. We can see how that works. But I'm pleased to welcome everyone to this webinar where dedicated experts in infectious disease prevention are going to share their latest guidance that you need for your companies or facilities. You will discover actionable steps to strengthen your current cleaning and disinfection protocols and also gain valuable insights on improving them. No doubt many of you are successful with what you do, and you're here to get a few tips. Some of you may be new to the industry and getting started. What can you expect during our webinar today? About an hour is the length we're planning. During the webinar, we're going to prioritize procedures and best practices, along with using proven technology and products. You're going to learn to implement highly effective cleaning and disinfection processes that effectively disrupt the transmission of infectious agents within facilities. As we get started, you can see the chat feature. Make sure you leave that open. And our panelists with us today, we'll introduce them in a moment. They'll be keeping an eye on that as well. So if you'd like to comment there, we do have the Q&A option at the bottom of your platform as well. And we'll have that moderated. So we prefer you use the Q&A for official questions, but we'll also watch the chat as well, because at the end of our webinar, we're going to have some dedicated time to answer your questions. So think about the content we're going to go into and the questions you might have to ask our panelists. So let's get to know our three ladies here who are going to handle the content of our webinar. They're going to share with you who they are, what they do. And Alice, let's start with you, Julie. You're not unmuted. Let's start with you, Julie. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Nakos. I'm Director of National Accounts here at PDI Healthcare, and I manage our janitorial and office distributors, as well as support our EVS strategy for the company. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Facilities and Environmental Engineering, and I've worked in healthcare for the past 19 years, my entire career, including 10 years in various hospitals across the country as an EVS leader. And I'm grateful to be here today.
Glad to have you, Julie. Thank you. Alice, let's go to you next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alice Brewer. I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Affairs here at PDI, and I lead our field clinical team. We're a team of epidemiologists and infection preventionists who work with our customers, and then I kind of, from a corporate level, aid PDI in terms of clinical strategy and visibility and influence with our industry partners, and really supporting the business and sales team with all of the clinical expertise and information that they need. I have a bachelor's in biology and a master's in infectious disease epidemiology. So I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and spent a lot of time in a lot of different hospitals and love working with EVS and IPs and nurses and everybody in the field.
Great to have you, Alice. And when you go to the hospital, at least you're not a patient.
That's right.
All right. And then Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Picker. I am the National Accounts Manager for EVS at PDI. I work very closely with Julie on our EVS strategy. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Hotel Administration from UNLV and an MBA in Hospitality Finance from La Roche in Switzerland. Been in healthcare about 15 years now. I worked with two large EVS hospital systems as an EVS leader. And then about 5 years ago, I joined TrueD. So since then, I've been working with countless hospitals across the US, a couple outside the US on their disinfection programs. And then I also hold several AHE certificates. And I'm very happy to be here with everyone today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Jeff Cross, the Media Director for ISSA, and I don't know much about disinfection, except I'm going to ask the questions. So these are our experts here today. I'm the moderator. PDI is the sponsor of this webinar, but you're going to get content that you can use in your business, your facilities, actionable thoughts and procedures. The topic of our webinar today is core concepts of disinfection. And the subtitle you might say is how to implement a layered approach to break the chain of transmission in facilities. Something during COVID that was extremely important, something we don't want to forget about because we need this all the time. So ladies, thanks for your introductions. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Okay. Well, first up is this topic. We all know and value proper disinfection techniques and products, but so many call themselves experts in this. Alice, can you define the role and responsibility of an infection prevention expert? And of course, others can comment on this as well.
Sure. So an infection prevention expert, most commonly we refer to them as an infection preventionist. You might hear them referred to as an IP. They're professionals who are tasked with making sure that everybody working and receiving care in the health system are doing, everything that's possible to try and prevent infections. So it could be a lot of different things. It can be everything from developing policies and implementing them, monitoring for healthcare associated infections and mitigating their spread, providing education across the board to lots of different departments, and then evaluating cleaning and disinfection products and protocols. And there are lots of other things. You talk to any IP and they'll be able to give you a long list of things that they're doing every day. But very similar to environmental services, they really interact and work with just about every department within a healthcare organization. So they're working with nursing, they're working with EVS, they're working to educate patients and doctors and all the other allied health professionals, anybody really that's in the building. So they spend a lot of time educating themselves and keeping up with certifications and the latest information and best practices in the field to make sure that they're the most knowledgeable person on infection prevention.
Sounds like a true expert description to me. Jennifer, Julie, anything to add there?
That was a great introduction there, Alice. Thank you. I mean, yes, IP is going to be your experts in there, but EVS also has to be the experts because they're the ones that are out there every single day and they're taking care of that hospital just like they would their home. And a lot of times you spend more time in the hospital than you do at home. So it really comes full circle when you have the two departments working together well.
I would just add, don't be afraid to lean on them, right? So no matter what industry you're in, you probably have someone that's the infection prevention expert, or, obviously in a hospital, you have dedicated staff, but even in other facilities, lean on them, whether it's a nurse or somebody who has that clinical excellence in your facility. Don't be afraid to ask them questions or, share, hey, we're thinking about this product, or what should we be concerned about right now? There's lots of tools and experts out in the field. And I just encourage you, if you don't work with them, that you should do that to help make sure you're doing all the right things in your industry.
Good information. Before we move on to our next point, I see in the chat, folks are asking about the recording of this, and Martha answered that, but in case you're not looking at the chat, you will get a copy of this. Everyone on the webinar, everyone who registered will get a copy of this recording. So you can watch it at your leisure as well. So our next point we're going to get into is kind of a three-part question. I'm going to put it all out there, and then you three can talk about this. It's about disinfection. Here we go. Why is surface disinfection important? How does it impact facilities across the continuum of care? And how has it evolved over the years? If you can remember what those three questions are. Let's start with you, Jennifer. Does that work for you?
You want me to take the first part?
Yeah,
Jen?
you take the first one,
Okay.
Alice. Yeah.
So I'll handle, why disinfection is important, which, everybody on here obviously is interested in disinfection and understands that it needs to be done. But I think as a public health epidemiologist, I look a lot at healthcare associated infections and how much of a problem they are and continue to be globally. Just in the US, we are sitting around 600,000 a year, and that was pre-pandemic. And, that costs billions of extra dollars in terms of spending for patients and for hospitals. So it's a big problem from a health standpoint, from a financial standpoint. And these infections are often caused by pathogens or organisms that can spend months, weeks, years sometimes on surfaces if they're left undisturbed. So you really have to be thoroughly cleaning and disinfecting all of your surfaces in a hospital, not just the high touch. You have to get everything because if you aren't thoroughly cleaning, then those organisms are hanging out. They pose a risk to patients. They pose a risk to healthcare workers, to families and visitors. And so we need to make sure that we're disinfecting those surfaces so we're not increasing the risk of an infection or a dangerous illness for the people that we're working with and we're caring for.
The length of time you mentioned is scary.
It is. When I was working in infection prevention and, teaching our new hires, I would always put up a chart that showed how long some of these organisms could last on surfaces. And it was always, there would be like an audible gasp every time I would put that chart up, because people don't realize that some things can, if you don't touch that with a disinfectant, it'll be there years later.
Yeah, I
Well, I
couldn't
learned
agree.
something right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
I was
you.
gonna say, I couldn't agree more with Alice. And I think us having worked in the healthcare space for a long time, we're very used to this. But if it's not a space that you're in, you don't realize how important it is, right? And how important disinfection is. And we're always hearing about new emerging pathogens, right? And of course, COVID had a huge impact on highlighting the importance of disinfection on a global scale, right? We were all concerned about it. Personally, I believe sanitation and disinfection have always been important and will continue to be. I think for facilities, they should have detailed cleaning and disinfecting plans with products that meet their facilities' needs. In a school, you might be concerned with the flu virus, right? Or in a long-term care facility, maybe it's C. diff. In hospitals, you should be using a broad spectrum, intermediate level disinfectant so it covers everything, right? So understand what's important in the facility that you are working in, and what products you need to meet those needs in your facility, right? I think that's a great place to start. I think when you look at the evolution of it, right, which was kind of the last part of that, and when you look, actually practice of disinfection hasn't changed a ton. History goes back to the Egyptians used wine and vinegar to disinfect surfaces. And we know chemicals like quats and bleach and phenolics have been around for a century and actually still used today, right? I think what has changed is the chemistry of disinfectants and how they've become more advanced and combining formulations. Those are things that we've done at PDI with our Super Sandy Cloth. We combine a quat and an alcohol together, which gives you the heightened outcomes, quicker kill times, right? That's something that the industry's always been looking for and asking for, something that's quick, but still effective and has broad coverage when it comes to kill claims, but simple to use, safe on surfaces, safe around people and the public. Those are all really important things to look at. We've also seen a growth in technology and, how we can improve outcomes by adding technology like UVC robots, right? When you add a robot to your disinfection, you're adding a layer of protection to your facilities. I think as far as what's to come next, I don't know the answer, but I do believe we may continue to see advancements in disinfection around automated technology, right? How do we automate some of the disinfection process? Do we see more advances in robots and other technology that can help aid us in the disinfection process? I think overall, I'm just really excited to see what's next.
The Egyptians used wine.
Wine and vinegar was what
Red
they
wine or
used
white
to do.
wine?
I don't know which one.
Okay.
Both. Maybe it was like a combined wine, but yeah. So it's been
Interesting.
around forever.
Okay. Things have changed, and I know PDI has great products to help those attending. Before we move to Jennifer to get her comment, Alice, you mentioned that chart. Now we got people wanting that chart. So all those who are attending, if Alice would like to send that to you, she will. She'll have your information.
Yes, I will make sure that that gets distributed.
That's interesting. Okay. See all the little bugs that live long time on surfaces.
It's a scary chart.
Yeah. I want to see it too, so send it to me.
I was going to say,
I will.
it should be shared. It should be shared. That's for sure.
Yeah.
When we would do training, that was a big thing that we would look at is what pathogens are we seeing in the facility and what do we need to do to combat that? And then looking to the future of what could we be seeing soon? Because if you've been around for a little while, you remember the Ebola and we're like, okay, we never want to see that come back around. So looking at the future, we want to make sure that we have products available that are going to be able to combat those future super bugs that decide to come into our lives.
Yeah, you don't know what the future is going to bring. I mean, we just went through COVID. I remember it was December before it happened, there was talk, and then it was just here. So yeah, you want to be ready. I think we covered that pretty well. Let's talk about our next point. When choosing a disinfectant, how can a facility ensure that surface disinfectants will not damage their surfaces or equipment? Who wants to start us off?
take this one.
Okay.
So compatibility has been a really hot topic right now. I just seem like the last 5 years, it's been more and more prevalent in the talk track of EVS and IP. But so the first thing you want to do is go to the manufacturer's IFU or instructions for use. So when you go to that, you're going to see a list of approved disinfectants, ones that they've already tested on their equipment, and you'll be able to look at that list and kind of choose from there. But in a general sense, a more neutral pH level will show less damage than high acid or high basic. You'll see plastics, metals get corrosion or get damaged from a not neutral pH level. So that's the first thing, is really look at that IFU. Then what you're going to want to do is, what I would suggest, go to the chemical manufacturer's website. So at PDI, we have a dedicated compatibility website page, and you can plug in the device, the manufacturer, and see all the products that we have that are compatible with that piece of equipment. We have over 1,500 pieces of equipment in there, so it's quite robust, and it's a job that just keeps going to add to that list as we get products tested. And then I think the last thing I would say is have a seat at the table. So if your facility is purchasing new equipment or new furniture, I would say be there. Or if you can't be there, have your infection preventionist, a champion there that's going to look at that IFU, see what disinfectants they can use it on. They can use on that piece of equipment. I will say, I was just reading a forum post, and a hospital just purchased all new waiting room equipment or waiting room furniture. So EVS gets with the manufacturer and they're like, okay, so what disinfectants can we use? How often? And the manufacturer said once a month they could disinfect this waiting room furniture. So all that to say, you got to be aware of what you have and what you're buying, because that's going to be a big problem for this hospital now. You can't just disinfect a waiting room once a month. So that's what I have on the compatibility piece. Anyone else wants to jump in with anything?
Yeah, I would just add, I've had similar stories where they'd buy something when I was working in a facility, and it's like, how are we going to maintain that, right? So I learned quickly to put a seat at the table and say, we need to look at what we're buying. Everything needs to be cleanable in our facilities. They need to be able to hold up to a standard disinfectant. And I think, again, and you spoke about this, Jen, but like, lean on the resources. There's a lot of companies, your distributors, your facilities people who have resources. Don't try to do it alone. I really advocate for that. I was doing it alone on my own many times, but there's so many pieces of equipment or so many types of furniture. So looking at them, using any guides or resources that are out there to help you make the right decision is always going to make sure that you're reducing your potential bioburden and bacteria that are in your facilities. So super important to do that, and to make sure that you're looking at your furniture, your equipment, your surfaces, and if it's damaged, if there's cracks in it, that is so important. And I'm sure Alice could comment on that, but when you see cracks in things, you are now like opening up for like a host of things to live in these. So I don't know if you want to add. Alice.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that goes along with leaning on your experts in the building. Check in with infection prevention. They're probably rounding pretty deliberately, looking for damaged floors or furniture or pieces of equipment, because absolutely, once it becomes cracked or there's any kind of break in the surface, it becomes next to impossible to clean, and that becomes an infection prevention risk, makes EVS's job harder. So if you guys aren't seeing it as EVS, check with IP. They probably are keeping track and may have already gone to facilities with a list. So work with your team and your colleagues in the facility.
I was going
to say, I have more to add too. So you go first, Julie.
Well, I noticed a comment in the chat from Daniel, and he's so true. And we actually typically lean on our hospital customers to help us with those letters to manufacturers, right? So when manufacturers create things, they typically test one product, right? It's great when it's our product. I'll say that. It's like, oh, they tested our product. This is great. But a lot of times they're not testing every product that's on the market, right? So you can reach out to those manufacturers directly and say, hey, I'm looking to use this product. It's a very similar chemistry, similar formulation. Are you okay with us using it? You know, your manufacturer of your disinfecting wipes can help with that as well. But it comes a lot from the hospital. And I had done that in my past as an EVS director. We had new floors get put in and they wanted us to use a special cleaning product on the floor. And I'm like, we're not buying another product. Here's what we use. Do you approve it? And then they came back and approved it, right? So I couldn't agree more with yours, Daniel. Just because it's not there doesn't mean it's going to automatically damage it. Try to figure out if there's a way to get it added or get that manufacturer to approve your use of the products that maybe you're already using in your facility.
Yeah, because if you need a special product for this one piece of equipment, human factor says if it's not easy and accessible, it's not going to be used. So if you have one specific product for one piece of equipment, if it's not attached to that piece of equipment, someone's going to use something else on it.
Defaulting to the easy, huh?
Mm.
Yeah, okay. Well covered, I believe. We can move to our next point. Let's pivot to our subtitle, which is how to implement a layered approach to break the chain of transmission in facilities. So the question is, that's an important statement, but what does that look like?
Yeah, so the chain of infection transmission is a really frequently referenced model in infection prevention. I know EVS is aware of it too. And it identifies all of those elements that are present in that chain that leads to an infection transmission. So the pathogen, the reservoir, the mode of transmission, the host, but it also includes then the strategies for breaking that chain. So that can be hand hygiene, isolation protocols, personal protective equipment, preventative treatment for patients, and then also good cleaning and disinfection practices. And, you know, you can look at that across the breadth of that spectrum of all of those different things that you could do in those categories. And it really helps to illustrate that not only is the transmission of infection complex, there's a lot of components to it, there are a lot of things that are happening. The means of then preventing that infection needs to have multiple layers and components, because you are not going to address all of the risks of that transmission with a single strategy or product or, you know, intentional action. You really have to be addressing things at multiple points along that chain to make sure that you're kind of keeping that risk low.
And with, you know, IP has their interventions that they really go after. And then EVS, you have to just have a really solid disinfection program. And you have to know what pathogens you're going to find in your facility. You have to know your products, know your kill times, know your contact times, know, you know, all the claims that your products have on them. And then, you know, if you need that extra layer, because it's a layered approach, you know, UVC is going to be that one thing that you can bring in there after the chemical disinfection that's going to get to a lot of those spaces that maybe you missed during that process.
Yeah, I guess for me, you guys did a great job, right? Like Alice, you can explain that, you know, process really well from an infection prevention standpoint. And Jen, understanding your facility needs and the products that you use is really important. I think, you know, identifying it, isolating it, right? And then treating the surfaces is really key to that layered approach. What I would add is that it's really important to have policies and procedures in place to train your teams. And not just initial training. You should be doing ongoing training, having competencies to make sure your staff are competent in what you're teaching them, and including disinfection in huddles and weekly safety meetings, and just making sure that it is an important part and always top of mind, right? Always making sure that proper disinfection is just something that your staff are thinking about every single day.
Okay. Good information. Our next question is, what recommendations or strategies can you provide to help build the confidence of those served by environmental services personnel? think that's a good question.
Absolutely. I'll start out with that one, Jeff. So, like, as a prior EVS director, I think it is so important to ensure that your staff are confident, but also proud of what they do, right? Because what they do is so important to the safety and well-being of every person that visits a facility that you maintain, right? No matter what type of building, hospital, an office building, everyone that's going in there can be susceptible to getting something that's been left behind on the surface, right? We spoke about training. That is an important factor to build confidence in your team. I also believe in having a process that's easy to follow. Jen spoke about that too, right? Easily accessible, easy to follow, and trusted and effective, right? It's been proven to be effective. It's really important. And during my years as an EVS director, I found anytime I could reduce the potential for human error, right? We are all human. No matter how many times you train an employee, it's easy to make a mistake or maybe skip a step. So I think anytime you can reduce the potential for human error, reduce the number of steps in a process, and enhance the overall compliance, you're ultimately creating an environment where your staff feel confident in their abilities. I also took the opportunity as a director to learn and to continue to grow my skills. And one example was I did some Lean Six Sigma training. And I think if you haven't taken any, there's lots of opportunities to look at that as a facilities manager or somebody who's servicing buildings and doing cleaning. There's always a lean approach that you can look at. And I think it's really great to take a step back sometimes and look at your current practices and figure out if there's a way to improve that process, right? We see facilities continue to look for clinically effective solutions that are operationally easy to implement and be able to do consistently and still be financially effective. And I think if you can find those three key things in your processes, I think it's a great way to bring value and confidence to your teams.
I'll just say this, it doesn't take much to lose confidence.
Yeah.
To have an area that's just not clean or it's visible soil, and then there's infectious issues with that. So this is an important question because you want to build the confidence in those you serve. They have to feel good about what you're doing. Yeah.
And if they know the why behind a lot of this, that always helps. I mean, we used to talk about, we had a board and it just said why on it. And we would go up and write our whys. It didn't even have to be work related, just so that people felt like they had the confidence. They wrote the whys. And then every huddle we talked about, okay, why are we here today? Who are we here for? We're here for the patients. Those patients could be your family members. So we always talk about that. And I think that always kept it, top of mind. And it was always a good strategy to get everyone kind of pumped in the morning too.
Yeah, and I would, Julie and Jen are our EVS experts having worked in it. But one thing that I always saw was, empowering our EVS staff to ask questions and feel like they're involved, giving them, kind of not the right, but encouraging them to talk to the nurses, talk to the patients, explain what they're doing, and not feel like they have to, do their job silently and in the background, because they are arguably some of the most important people in the building. So, really making them feel like they're a part of the patient's healing process and they're part of the team, and included in, conversations and congratulations and all of that piece of it can really help them feel like they're included and involved, and patients see that, patients and families see that.
Absolutely. And I think we have to remember that even though those on the webinar are EVS professionals working in the industry, also consumers and patients ourselves. So look at it that way, and that might help as well with your viewpoint. Covered well? Okay. Our next question is for Alice as an infection preventionist and Jennifer as a former EVS leader. Can you share some success stories or suggestions for building a strong partnership between EVS and IP?
Jen, you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first and I'll follow up.
Okay. So one thing that I tried to be really intentional about was consistent communication and sharing information between IP and EVS. So IP likely has information or insight that EVS does not, and vice versa. I might be in a meeting as, the system lead for infection prevention with, cardiology and the GI team and surgery, and maybe EVS wasn't at the table for whatever reason, but something came up that related to what EVS does. So, just that exchange of information is really important. And I always included my EVS counterpart in our Infection Prevention Council meetings, which we had monthly. Even if we weren't talking about anything specifically related to cleaning and disinfection, you never know what little nugget of information or what issue someone might bring up that EVS needs to know about or might be able to weigh in on. And I would sometimes be surprised about, someone would bring something up and, an EVS director would be like, oh yeah, we were looking at something that can help address that, or we're aware of that. So, just that cross communication is really important for that partnership. And, I was always welcome at their meetings, and, if I was passing by their office, I would sometimes just pop in to say hi and see if they needed anything. So, just act like you're a part of the team, because you are. So be intentional about that.
Yeah, but I had a great EVS IP partnership at one of my hospitals, and we would round every week. Sometimes it was only 15 minutes because we were busy, and sometimes we were able to get a full hour in, but we would round every week on a different unit. We would talk to nursing, we would talk to EVS, we would check the fluorescent markings in a room together, and it really gave that cohesive, bond between EVS and IP. The EVS employees on the floors saw the two of them walking around, or two of us, or whoever it was, and then it gave them the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, I have this question. And they felt so comfortable being able to just ask those questions now that they realize, hey, these two are working together and they're rounding together. I see them together all the time. IP stops by EVS just to say hi, or, to talk about something that's actually really important that's going on. But they see that cohesiveness together, and then they feel more comfortable raising questions or asking questions, or even, coming up with an answer themselves and bringing that answer to leadership to see if that's something they want to go for.
Good points. Daniel says the relationship between these two departments has never been more important than it is today. You would agree with that?
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I loved how COVID did a really great job of highlighting EVS, right? It was on the news and they would be thanking their EVS workers, and it's just as important today, right? We've always been important. I say that I was so proud, when I would see those, but as, an EVS professional, it was, we were always important. And I think you can't undervalue that. But having that strength with your IP where you guys are aligned and on the same page and, fighting the same battle, right? We're all in this together. And I think the more that you can look at it from that team approach and that we all have the same goal, we're not, battling each other. I think that's just so important. And again, don't be afraid to ask for a seat at the table or reach out to people or lean on organizations. If you don't have an IP in your facility, maybe if you're not in a hospital, right, and you're in other facilities, I've seen somebody from jails and other things. There's a lot of resources you can lean on out there to help you find answers and solutions for your problems in your facilities.
Very good. Our next question is, I'm not sure who's going to start, but the question is, are there any gaps that exist in disinfection? Gaps.
Yeah, so when Julie and Jen and I were talking about this yesterday, something came up that we just had a session at a conference about. So reading labels on disinfectants and cleaning products it's something that none of us in IP really learn. And Julie and Jen said it's really not something that is intentionally taught to anybody on the EVS side either. It's sort of one of those things that you learn when there's a problem. If someone's made a mistake or there's, a goof up, then you're going to really quickly look at the label and see if you can figure out what it says. So, it's really important information on there about what organisms it kills, what's the contact time, what are the active ingredients, do I need to use PPE? Should I, be handling or storing or disposing of this in a particular way? what's the EPA registration number? Or how do I find that? What does that mean? What, so it's information that we should know and we need to have, but it's not usually something that we are taught. So that's something that I think is a big gap that I've noticed, and certainly am guilty of that. It wasn't until I started working at PDI that I paid as much attention to labels as I do now. So I think that's one thing that we can probably do a little better on educating EVS and IPs on.
Yeah, I mean, we can make jokes about reading labels, but we don't need to. I think we all agree that it doesn't happen often enough, but all the information's there, isn't it? Everything you need to know.
It should be. And so it's just learning how to find it.
Okay.
And that EPA registration number is your master key, right? So you can go to the EPA and look up the master label too, which typically has more information, right, Alice?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that, should always be bookmarked. You should always have that master label website bookmarked on your computer so that you can quickly grab it. Because it has more information on it even than what you'll see on an SDS sheet. So, it's really important information.
Manufacturers can't fit everything on that label.
Right.
So that master label has sometimes a lot more information. And, I think same as I've come into this role over the years, you kind of learn things and you start digging in more and you're like, gosh, I never knew that maybe there was more organisms or there was additional kill claims on this that wasn't on the actual label on the container, or there's just additional information. You can't fit everything on the label, although it's so important to read what's on the direct label. I think it's equally as important, especially for your primary chemicals that you're using, that you are digging into the master label as well and making sure you understand the full approval of those products.
And labels only get printed on bottles every once in a while, and so as they change, it's going to change in that EPA registration first.
Yeah. Good
point. Okay, we're getting close to our Q&A, so everyone stick with us for that. We have our last point, official point, to end our formal discussion. I think it's a good one. This is interesting. Can you speak to emerging technologies or advancements in disinfection that are being researched or implemented? And as part of this, how has what we've learned in the past helped now and in the future? Everyone wants to know what's coming up. So that's the question right there.
I have all the answers, Jeff.
Okay, Julie wants to start.
I guess I could speak to my time here at PDI, right? We have a long history of innovation. I think it's a proud thing, right? We actually created the first EPA registered hard surface disinfecting wipe. I was only 35 years ago. So you even think about how far disinfection has come. Wipes, right? And disinfecting wipes have only been approved through the EPA for 35 years. And Trudy, who's our PDI company, pioneered the first UVC disinfection robot, right? Those are really great innovations that we've brought to the market. And at PDI, we're always innovating. And I will say we often have several projects in our pipeline. Ultimately, our goal is to explore the needs of the market, right? We want to hear from you. It's so important as a manufacturer to understand where there's gaps, where your challenges are, and really what we can do to help identify solutions and build products that make sense for you, right? We don't want to just innovate something that's not going to fix your problem. So we'd love to hear from you if there's something that you're struggling with. And I think all manufacturers would love to help bring more solutions to our customers. And I would say just even in the 10 years I've been out of directly leading an EVS team in a hospital, there's been so many cool new products and technologies that I wish I had at my disposal, right? So there's always new emerging things coming out. For us, one of those products is our newest wipe, which is the first ready-to-use non-bleach sporicidal, Sani-Hypercide. This gives you the power of a sporicidal, right? So effective against C. diff, but more compatible than traditional bleach, and allowing you to use one product for all your disinfecting needs. And talk about simple, right? One product that can cover that broad spectrum, including C. diff, is something that just wasn't available when I was an EVS director. So be open to hearing about the new things out there. Reach out to your distributor partners and say, hey, is there anything new? Reach out to your manufacturer partners. What do you have? Is there anything new and exciting that can help us? There's a lot more out there than you may even know about. So Jen, what about, could you maybe share something about how the UVC market has evolved and maybe what's new from Trudy?
Well, of course I can. You get a nice plug here. So if you don't know already, PDI Trudy launched Trudy IQ system this year. So it's a Trudy IQ tower, it's a Trudy IQ controller, and it's a Trudy IQ Scout. And it's 3 pieces that all nest together in one. It is a awesome piece of equipment. I will tell you, we've taken the voice of our customers for the last decade and developed this new UVC robot, and it's now in the market. So if you have not gone to our website and looked at it, I encourage you to. It's really cool. So there's the cool UVC that's on the market now, and you should all know about it.
What is the website? Just mention that.
It's PDI's website, so we're all one website.
PDIHC.com. So PDIHC for healthcare.com. You can check out all of our products and solutions there. And I think just to add to Jen's, that, you know, and I had said, that's what we do. We listen, right? What we did with the new IQ system was took all the things that maybe people complained about our original UVC and said, oh, I wish it did this. I wish it did that. And we were able to solve for so many of those solutions, right? And that's what we want to continue to do. It's hard what we do. It's hard to maintain buildings. It's hard to keep labor and staff. And we know there's been a lot of staffing challenges out there. Anything we can do to help you guys be more effective in your jobs, keep your staff happy, right? And be able to train them simply. That's really what we want to do as a manufacturer and as colleagues of yours. We did this, right? So we've all been in your shoes and know the challenges that you have too.
Yeah, that's important. Okay, yeah, it's pdihc.com. I put that in the chat
Correct.
for everyone. If it's wrong, I typed it. I think I got it right though. So
You did.
ready for the questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so folks, if everyone's sticking with us, thank you for being part of the webinar. If you have more questions, add it to the Q&A part portal at the bottom of your screen. Let's start with this one. I heard you talk about the EPA list. So let's do this question. The EPA keeps putting out these lists with approved products.
Yeah.
What are they and what do they mean? Like, talk about that
Yeah.
process.
So, you know, we refer to alphabet soup a lot in this business, and the EPA lists kind of fall into that category. We have A through Q currently of lists. And so what the EPA does is they create these lists that are pathogen specific. So for example, list P is Candida auris, which is, you know, kind of the newest, well, it is not even that new anymore, but it's the current kind of big concern right now. So list P is all the disinfectants, EPA registered disinfectants that have an approved claim against C. auris. And so all of these other lists include things like SARS-CoV-2, that's list N, C. diff is list K. So, you know, you can kind of go through the alphabet of pathogens, and they will give you the list of all of the registered disinfectants with that claim. And so that means that the EPA has reviewed the data, has reviewed the claim on the master label, and has determined that it is actually effective against that particular organism. So, you know, it simplifies the process a little bit. If you know that you're having a C. auris outbreak, you know, you can go to the EPA's website and pull up list P, and it'll tell you every registered disinfectant that will be effective against C. auris. And so it's really helpful, I think, for EVS and for IP. If you're not sure if you have a disinfectant that will be effective, you know, you can find it on the list. The other piece of that sometimes confuses people is the emerging viral pathogen list, which is list Q. So SARS-CoV-2 was originally on the emerging viral pathogens because we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know what was going to kill it. And so the emerging viral pathogen list are disinfectants that kill enough things that we're confident it will kill, you know, a new virus that we haven't had a chance to test things against. I believe monkeypox is currently still on the emerging viral pathogen list. So, you know, it's a great resource if you're wondering what you need to use to kill something.
Interesting. Okay. Any thoughts, Jennifer, Julie, before we move to the next question?
Alice really covered that pretty well.
Okay.
EPA.gov, I think, right? Is that
Yeah.
it? I'm there.
EPA.gov.
I look things
Another
up
good
on a regular.
bookmark.
Yeah, I don't know all the answers. We don't know all the answers. I'm constantly looking things up too. So EPA.gov is a great resource for that. Yep.
Okay, now warning everybody, these questions we got from the audience are long. So here's the first one I'll go with. We struggle to find a product that is effective against C. diff and meets requirements for striker bed cleaning. They have to be ammonium chloride, phenol. I am not a scientist. Phenol, or 1 part bleach and 100 parts water. The products we find effective against C. diff are peroxide based, and that is not approved for use. PDI, do you have any suggestions or recommendations? Man, and there's a longer one after this. Go ahead.
I would connect you with our compatibility expert, which I will say Alice, Jennifer, and I are not that, but we do have a compatibility expert on our team. Ansel is amazing, and he's got lots of relationships with the actual manufacturers of equipment like Stryker. We also do testing on surfaces, so similar surfaces, right? So as a manufacturer, we may test on plastics that are used in the Stryker beds, right? Or on glass or on aluminum. So my suggestion, just because I don't know the specifics of the Stryker, is feel free to reach out to one of us. We would love to connect you with Ansel. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure can lead you in the right way, even if it's not one of our products. We want to make sure we're helping our customers protect the environment, do what's best by them. And that's ultimately what's most important to us. So feel free to reach out. It's hard, right? The compatibility piece, Jennifer spoke a lot about it in healthcare specifically. Ansel spends so much time talking to customers about compatibility and specific pieces of equipment and furniture. So he or any other compatibility specialist out there would be a great resource for you. But we understand the struggles. We wish it was as simple as having everything approved on every one of our products. I will plug us a little bit. We are approved on more devices than any of the other ready-to-use wipes out there, right? We spend, and my point in saying that is it's super important to us because we know it's super important to our customers, right? So we have dedicated staff and we really work hard on getting more pieces of equipment added to that. So if we can get one of our wipes approved on it, because it's not approved today, we'd love to do that as well to help you out with that problem.
Okay, anything to add, Jennifer, Alice?
I'm with her on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right, our next question, no big words here, thank you very much. How do you feel about using microfiber towels for cleaning medical facilities compared to products like PDI, one-time use towels? We've had a few infection control people who wanted us to use microfiber towels rather than products like PDI, based on what the last facility she worked at used, not based on knowing what products like PDI could do. I never swayed, and I eventually won her over on the use of PDI products, working with my PDI salesperson, getting info to educate her. So
And
the
that
question is, how do you feel?
May have come from me. I spend a lot of time on this liquids to wipes, right? So there are clinical studies out there, right? Not Julie sitting here saying this. There are published clinical studies by Dr. Gerber and other, scientists out there that show sometimes microfibers can be faulty. And I'm not saying all of them. There are good hospital grade level microfibers out there, but if you're not sure that you're getting the best ones, if you don't know where they're coming from, if you don't know that your liquid, meaning your disinfecting liquid and your microfiber work together, they could be causing issues. If you're using a quat, you could be quat binding. Dispensers can be faulty. I talked about reducing steps, right? When you look at the steps it takes to get a chemical out of the dispenser properly, mixing it with your microfiber, did it dilute correctly? Did it bind? Did I wring out too much of the liquid? There's a lot of steps there. I think there's a benefit in simplifying things and using something that is as simple as pulling the wipe and wiping a surface. That comes from me working at PDI, but also as an expert in the industry. I moved to wipes in my facilities as an EVS director, right? So these are things that I think are just simple and more effective. And there are studies out there that you can look up that are published in major journals that have shown that there can be faults in those processes. And human factor is always a piece in any process that you're doing. So every process can have some faults, but I think there's a lot of data out there that shows using a ready-to-use wipe. We do so much, right? I'll tell one quick story. I know we're at the end, but the Hyperside we spoke about, we went through 100 applicators, 100 wipes, the actual applicator, before we found one that worked perfectly with our liquid disinfectant. There's so much science that goes into a ready-to-use wipe that you just don't know what you're getting with the cloth sometimes. So I think taking that risk out of there, why would you risk it, in my opinion? I think the benefits are there to use a pre-saturated wipe.
Good points. Okay. No more Jennifer, Alice. I'll move to the next question.
I would say move to the next one because we are limited on time. We could talk about, Julie and I could talk about that for hours and hours and hours. So
We've got a few more minutes and a couple more questions. So now you've talked about disinfecting procedures and products. The question though is, where do I go to find proper disinfection guidelines? So someone's looking for information out there. What do you think?
Yeah, so, we talked about the EPA, epa.gov. If you're located in the US, that's going to be your kind of go-to place for what disinfectants are registered, and, make sure you're not buying something that hasn't been tested. I would also suggest looking at the CDC. The CDC tends to have really good and concise updated disinfection guidelines. So cdc.gov, and you can look for disinfection, and they have voluminous amounts of information and documents that instruct you on how to disinfect different surfaces and under different circumstances and conditions. So those are great resources, more bookmarks to add to your browser. And then, pay attention to what your local rules and regulations are. Sometimes we see a little bit of difference state to state. And then facilities will sometimes have, different rules and regulations. So again, lean on your experts within your organization. And then if you're outside of the US, the regulations and guidelines can be a little bit different. So just, look for, whatever government agency or regulatory body is determining what guidelines you should be using. And, look for the educational resources out there. There are lots of different resources that you can pull from.
I would add ISSA has some great tools and resources, right?
Yes.
Part of it. APIC, which I know is a big piece for us as well, right? So they publish things, and Jen can talk about AHE, but AHE is another great organization that has a lot of training and education and guidelines, right, on how to clean, what steps to follow. And I think that, that's kind of been a reoccurring thing we've said, but there are lots of resources out there for you. So find the ones that work for your facility and what your needs are, and lean on them as a guide for you to help figure out what your best, cleaning and disinfection processes should look like.
And we have a few more minutes. Another question is something I think everyone faces. We have a bunch of companies trying to sell us products. How do we weed out the bad and find the good? I mean, you can buy them all and try them.
You got to do your research. So like we've talked about for the last few minutes, is, going and finding out what pathogens you have in your place of work, your facility that you're in, and then finding out what you need coming later, maybe in the future, and then looking at the products. So if you're comparing two products, you want to look at their kill claims. You want to look at what they've been tested on. You want to look at their contact times. You want to look at how difficult the process is. So you really have to actually do your research. I can say AHE is great for some of the forums. APIC is great for the forums. A lot of people have used a lot of these products, and so they know them already and they can speak to those. But your rep will be a great resource for you as well. Ask them for studies, ask them for information. If they can't provide you with the information, I would start looking at a different company, because they should have all of those claims, all of that information, and they should have it readily available for you.
Okay, good information. I mean, that's going to happen all the time, I would think. Yeah. Let's do one more question. And we do have people from different parts of the world with us today. Are there different regulations in the United States compared to other countries? Maybe we could speak to that.
Yeah, they do vary a little bit. I mean, we always want to disinfect. You always want to be cleaning surfaces. That's universal. But in terms of what chemicals are approved or what particular products are approved, you'll see some differences country to country, just because their regulatory bodies, you know, maybe testing things differently. So you might see some differences there. But there's so much information and education out there. It's very easy to find out what those differences are. And so I always just encourage people, you know, if I happen to be talking with someone from outside of the US, you know, find your country's governing body for cleaning and disinfection. And they should be able to provide you with the information that you need.
Okay. Well, we are at our hour. I want to thank you three ladies. By the way, Julie, someone commented that the sign on your wall is true. The best is yet to come.
Right.
So I agree with that as well. But thank you for your time today. We had a nice crowd with us and lots of good comments in the chat. And for those that wanted the chart and maybe some other assets that PDI can offer, that'll be coming via email in the next few days, along with the recording of this. So if you attended and you get this recording, you will get this recording, share it with those in your organization. It'll be a link and you can use it however you'd like. But ladies, great information and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Thanks,
so much for
everybody.
joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.